Every fall, while most folks are hauling their garden harvest into the refrigerator to slowly go soft and spoil over the coming weeks, my people are doing something that would look downright strange to a modern eye. We're out in the garden, digging holes in the cold ground and burying our vegetables in the earth, on purpose. And come the dead of winter, when we want a good meal, we go back out and dig them up again, and they come out of that frozen ground firm and fresh and crisp, as good as the day we buried them, sometimes better. It sounds like madness, I know, burying good food in the dirt, but it's one of the oldest and cleverest food-keeping tricks there ever was. And once you understand it, you'll see it's not madness at all, but pure genius. So today, I'm going to show you exactly why we bury our vegetables every fall, how it's done, and how you could do it too. Let me get right into it. So here's the whole secret, the reason this works. And it's a beautiful piece of simple wisdom. The earth, a little ways down, is a natural refrigerator. Think about it. Below the surface, the ground stays at a fairly steady, cool temperature all through the winter. Up top, the air might swing from freezing cold to bitter to a brief thaw and back again. But down in the earth, it stays cool and steady, and crucially, most often just above freezing. And that cool and steady and just above freezing is very nearly the perfect condition for keeping many vegetables fresh for months. The earth does for free and forever exactly what a refrigerator does with electricity. It holds your vegetables at that cool, steady, near freezing temperature that keeps them dormant and fresh right through the winter. So when we bury our vegetables, we're simply tucking them into the one great free refrigerator that's been there all along, right under our feet. The ground itself keeps them, using nothing but its own steady coolness, the way it has kept things for as long as there have been people to bury them. Now, which vegetables take to this? Because not everything does, and it matters. The ones that keep beautifully buried in the earth are the root vegetables, the ones that grow underground to begin with, which makes good sense when you think on it, for the ground is their natural home. Carrots keep wonderfully this way, staying crisp and sweet, often growing even sweeter after a touch of cold. Beets the same, turnips and rutabagas, parsnips, which the cold actually improves, turning them sweeter. Potatoes, that great staple, keep well in the earth's cool. And beyond the true roots, there are others that store this way too. Cabbages keep for months, winter squash and pumpkins, though those like it a bit less cold. So it's mainly the roots and the hardy keepers of the fall garden, the very vegetables that come ripe just as winter's coming on, as if nature planned it so, giving us the storing vegetables right at the moment we need to store them for the cold months ahead. Now let me tell you how it's actually done, because there are a few good ways, from the simplest to the more involved, and I'll walk you through them. The very simplest for some hardy roots is to just leave them right where they grew. Carrots and parsnips and some others can often be left in the ground where they grew, with a thick, heavy blanket of straw or leaves piled over top of them to keep the ground from freezing too hard, and you simply dig them up as you need them all winter long. The garden itself becomes your storage. No moving required. That's about as simple as keeping food gets. Just mulch them heavy and leave them be, and go harvest fresh from the frozen garden all winter. The next way, the classic old way, is what folks called a clamp or a pit. And this is the real heart of what I'm talking about. You dig a pit or a trench in a well-drained spot, and this is important, a spot where water won't pool and sit, because wet is the enemy of stored vegetables. You line the bottom of that pit with a good layer of clean straw. Then you pile in your vegetables, your carrots and beets and turnips and such, often in a neat mound. You cover them over with another thick layer of straw, wrapping them all around in it, and then over all of that, you shovel back a good layer of the earth, mounding it up over the top, packing it down to shed the rain. And there you have it, a clamp, a little buried mound where your vegetables sit nestled in straw, insulated by the earth, kept at that perfect, cool, steady temperature all winter long. When you want some, you open one end, take out what you need, and close it back up. The old folks kept whole winter's worth of vegetables this way, mounds of them buried about the garden, a natural larder in the earth itself. Now there's a bit of craft to doing it right, and I'll give you the important pieces, because the difference between success and a pit of rot comes down to a few key things. The first, and I said it already, but it bears repeating because it matters most, is drainage. Your pit or clamp must be somewhere the water drains away and does not sit, for standing water will rot your whole store in no time. High ground, well-drained soil, that's what you want. The second is that you only ever store your best, soundest vegetables, never any that are bruised or cut or diseased or starting to go, because one bad one rotting can spread and spoil the lot. So you pick through carefully and bury only the perfect, whole, unblemished ones. The third is the straw or leaves, the insulation, which does two jobs, keeping the frost from reaching the vegetables and letting a little air move so they don't suffocate and rot. And the fourth is to think about the little creatures, the mice and voles that would love to find your buried feast, and take what steps you can to keep them out, for a mouse that finds your clamp will invite all his friends. And of course there's the grandest version of all this, which is really the same idea made permanent, and that's the root cellar. A root cellar is nothing more than a room dug into the earth, or built into a hillside, or set down in a cellar under the house that uses that very same cool, steady earth temperature to keep vegetables all winter, but in a room you can walk into rather than a pit you must dig up. Bins of potatoes and carrots and beets, apples in their boxes, cabbages, squash, all kept for months in the cool dark of the earth-cooled room. It's the same principle as the buried clamp, just grander and more convenient, a whole dedicated space doing what the buried pit does. And a root cellar is one of the finest things a self-reliant home can have, a refrigerator the size of a room that runs on nothing at all, forever, keeping a winter's worth of food fresh with no power and no cost. Now let me tell you a bit more about the particular vegetables and their own peculiar ways, because each has its quirks, and knowing them is the difference between a fine store and a spoiled one. Take the potato, that great staple. The potato keeps well in the earth's cool, but it has one strict rule, and it's this: keep it in the dark. A potato left in the light turns green, and that green is not good to eat, so potatoes must be kept covered, dark, away from any light, which the buried clamp and the dark cellar do naturally. Take the carrot and the parsnip and the beet, the true roots. These love the cold and the damp, packed in a bit of moist sand or straw, and the cold actually does them a kindness, for it turns some of their starch to sugar, so a carrot or a parsnip pulled from the cold ground in winter is sweeter than the one you pulled in the fall. The cold improves them. Take the cabbage, which keeps for months, and there's an old way of pulling the whole plant, root and all, and burying it or hanging it head down in the cellar, and it holds far longer than a cut head would. And take the apple, if you store apples, and here's an important old bit of knowing. Apples give off something as they sit that makes potatoes and other roots want to sprout and spoil faster. So the old folks knew to keep the apple stored apart from the potatoes, not mixed in together. Little things like that, learned over generations, are what made the old storage work so well. It wasn't just throwing food in a hole. It was a real body of knowledge, each vegetable understood and treated according to its nature. And let me explain that sweetening a little more, because it's one of the loveliest things about this whole business, and it surprises folks. When the cold comes on, many of these hardy vegetables do something clever. They turn some of their stored starch into sugar as a kind of natural protection against the freezing, for the sugar helps keep them from being damaged by the cold. And the happy result for us is that they taste sweeter. This is why parsnips are traditionally left in the ground until after the hard frosts. Why winter carrots are sweeter than summer ones, why so many of these root vegetables are at their very best in the dead of winter, drawn fresh from the cold earth. So the earth doesn't just keep these vegetables. For some of them, it makes them better than they were when you buried them. There's a gift in that, a little kindness the cold does for those who know to wait for it. And it's one more reason the old folks prized their winter roots so. Let me also say more about that grand permanent version, the root cellar, because if this whole idea takes hold in you, that's where it leads, and it's worth understanding well. The finest root cellars work by a few simple principles, all of them the same earth wisdom made into a room. They're set into the earth, dug down or built into a hillside or placed in the cellar beneath a house, so the surrounding earth holds them cool and steady. They're kept cool but not freezing, dark, and with a certain dampness in the air, which the roots like, for a too dry cellar shrivels them. And the best ones have a way to let a little fresh air move through, a vent low and a vent high, so the air doesn't go stale and the temperature can be managed, letting in the cold when it's needed and closing it out when it's too bitter. A good root cellar, managed with a little knowledge, will keep a family in potatoes and carrots and beets and cabbages and apples the whole winter through, hundreds of pounds of good food, fresh and sound, on nothing but the coolness of the earth. It is, to my mind, one of the great wonders of the old self-reliant home, a thing that ought never to have been forgotten, and a thing well worth building for anyone with the means and the ground to do it. I remember well the root cellar of my growing up years and what a wonder it was to a child, though I took it for granted then. You'd go down the steps into the cool, earthy dark, and there it all was, the bins of potatoes, the carrots and beets down in their boxes of sand, the barrels of apples, the cabbages, the whole garden's harvest gathered into that one cool, dark room, enough to feed us all the long winter. In the bleakest, coldest, deadest part of the year, when nothing at all grew outside and the whole world was frozen hard, you could go down into that cellar and come up with an armful of fresh vegetables for the supper, as if it were still harvest time. There was a deep magic in that to me as a boy, and a deeper wisdom in it that I only came to understand as a man, that my family, through nothing but knowledge and the good earth, fed itself fresh vegetables clean through a winter that would have left an unprepared household with nothing at all. That cellar was security you could walk into and see, and it cost not 1 cent to run. Now let me be the honest neighbor and give you the plain cautions, because while this is wonderfully simple, there are a few real things to mind. Do check your stores through the winter when you can, for a vegetable that starts to rot should be pulled out before it spoils its neighbors. Do keep everything well drained and not too wet, which is the most common way folks fail at this. Do understand that different vegetables like slightly different conditions, some a bit cooler, some a bit less so, and you learn these things as you go. And do use good sense, and if you're new to it, learn the details properly from a good trusted guide, because there's real know-how in doing it well and it's worth learning right. This isn't dangerous the way some food keeping can be, but a poorly made clamp can lose you your vegetables, and that's a real waste of good food and good work, so it's worth doing carefully. With all that said, let me step back and tell you why I find this so wonderful, so worth sharing, beyond just the keeping of a few carrots, because there's something almost magical in it when you stop and really see it. Think of what most folks do. They grow or buy their vegetables, they cram them into a machine that must run on electricity every hour of every day, that costs money to buy and money to run and will fail them the moment the power goes out, and even then the vegetables slowly go soft and spoil within a couple of weeks. And here's the old way. You take those same vegetables, you tuck them into the cold ground with a bit of straw, using no machine, no power, no cost at all, and they keep fresh not for 2 weeks but for months, all the way through winter, in a natural refrigerator that has been sitting right under everyone's feet since the beginning of the world, asking nothing, costing nothing, never failing. When you see it clearly like that, it's the modern way that looks strange, not the old one. We've traded a free, foolproof, everlasting refrigerator, the earth itself, for a costly machine that does the job worse and depends on power that can fail. The old folks were not primitive for burying their vegetables. They were wise, they understood the earth and worked with it, and it fed them all winter for free. And there's a deeper thing in it still, the thing that runs through all these old ways. It's a kind of independence, a kind of security that most folks have lost entirely. The family that knows how to keep its harvest in the earth is a family that doesn't need the store or the power company to eat through the winter. They grow their food in the warm months, they tuck it into the ground as the cold comes on, and they draw it back out fresh all winter long, fed by their own garden and their own good earth, beholden to no one. That's a profound kind of freedom, and it was ordinary once, known in every farming household. The knowledge of how the earth keeps food, of the clamp and the pit and the root cellar, was simply part of knowing how to feed a family through a year, and it can be that again for anyone willing to learn it. Now, I know most of you aren't going to run out and dig a pit in the backyard tomorrow, and that's all right. But even if you never bury a single carrot, I want you to carry away the understanding of it, because it changes how you see things. The next time you look at your refrigerator humming away, keeping your vegetables for a costly week or two before they wilt, I want you to remember that there's an older, freer, better way that kept them for months, and that it still works exactly as well as it ever did. And should you ever wish to try it, should you have a garden and a bit of well-drained ground and the willingness to learn, You can have a refrigerator the size of your yard that runs on nothing and keeps your harvest all winter long. Start small if you like, just leaving some hardy carrots in the ground under a heavy mulch and digging them fresh in December, and see for yourself how the earth keeps them. From that small beginning, the whole old art is yours to reclaim. And let me leave you with one more small method, the very easiest of all for the town dweller with no garden and no room for a cellar, because I don't want anyone thinking this wisdom is only for those with acres. Even a bucket or a sturdy box will do. You take a container, pack your carrots or beets down in it in layers of moist sand or peat, the sand keeping them from touching and holding just the right dampness around them. And you set that container somewhere cold but not freezing, an unheated garage, a cold porch, a cool basement corner, a shed, and there in that humble bucket of sand, your roots will keep for months, cool and dark and damp, just as they would in a proper clamp or cellar. It's the same principle shrunk down to fit a small life, the cool, the dark, the damp, the roots nestled and dormant. So don't tell yourself you can't do this. Near anyone can keep a bucket of sand in a cold corner, and that alone is a piece of the old self-reliance reclaimed. Start there with a single box of carrots and sand and see how well the old way serves even in the smallest space. It's worth pausing to wonder why we ever let such a good and simple thing be forgotten, and the answer is the same as always. The store got close, and the refrigerator arrived, and it became easier to buy a few vegetables at a time all winter than to put up a whole harvest in the fall. And so, one generation at a time, folks stopped digging the clamps and building the cellars, and the knowledge faded, until now most folks would think you daft for burying a carrot. But easier is not always better, and what we traded away was real: the security, the independence, the fresh food kept for free through the deep of winter. And the good news, as always, is that none of it is truly lost. The earth still keeps food exactly as it always did. The knowing of it is all that slipped away, and the knowing can be taken right back up. So this fall, if you've a mind to, give it a try. Leave a row of carrots in the ground under a thick blanket of straw and go dig them up fresh on a cold winter day. Or dig yourself a little clamp and bury a mound of roots in straw and earth and open it in the deep of winter to find them crisp and good. Taste for yourself what the earth can keep, and feel the quiet wonder of drawing fresh vegetables from the frozen ground months after everything else has died back. And know that you've taken back one of the oldest and cleverest pieces of self-reliant wisdom there is, the knowing of how to let the good earth itself keep your harvest safe and fresh through the long, cold months, free, the way it has for our people since time out of mind. If this is the kind of practical old wisdom you've been hungry for, the kind that got quietly set aside and forgotten, then stay here with me. There's so much more where this came from, and I aim to bring it back to you, one piece at a time. Subscribe, and we'll keep remembering the old ways together, because some of the most useful things we ever knew are the simple ones we let ourselves forget, and the earth's own way of keeping our harvest is surely one of them.